So in that first experience that I had, increased the productivity of that plant by 26%. Wow. A plant built in the 40s. Here's where it all started for me. I started, I was a chemical engineer, Cornell University, I finished there, and I started working in a process plant. One of my first jobs is to actually automate one of the processes in the plant. So my generation of chemi, sure, we were, of course, developing different unit operations, but we were bringing in process controls for the first time. So compute was still very expensive. It could only be, fairly afforded by the largest corporations, U.S. government, and universities. Well, I worked for a very large corporation, and we had a plant that was built in the 40s. I want you to think about this. Built in the 40s, that made components for tire making and plastic pipes. Said, all right, implement this Honeywell TDC 3000 PLC. Okay, programmable logic controller. So implementing control systems. So the way to think about it, before then, processes were controlled by operators. You had somebody sitting there watching the reactions occur, looking at pressure and temperature and rates and flows, and it would go through some dynamic, and then they would observe it episodically, when you weren't talking about who got drafted that week in football, okay? And then you would episodically intervene and say, oh, I need to change this, I need to add more of this, take more of this away. And the reaction would move in this sort of a form. Okay, introduce compute. Now you go from episodic observation, 60, now you're observing 60 times a second. Now I can observe 60 times a second, whether or not you're talking about football at all. Not just let you know, you can now intervene. So the second part of that was now make an intervention, do the calculus, do the math. What is the proper intervention? So you go from this sort of a control paradigm to this type of a control paradigm. Everything under the curve is waste. So in that first experience that I had, increased the productivity of that plant by 26%. Wow. A plant built in the 40s, increased the productivity by 26%. So you say, what should people look for? They should look for implementing solutions that create productivity output. Yeah. So if you look at today, and I'm going to fast forward to today, we measure the ROI of the products that our companies sell to our customers every day. We're in freight, we're in shipping, we're in automotive, we're in healthcare, we're in 70 different industries. Yeah. Average ROI today that we measure is 625%. That's the products that our companies sell to our customers. 625% ROI. I don't know if any other business or product gives you that high.
Fantastic.
Gen AI takes that to an order of magnitude.
Oh my God.
Okay.
Nobody having a hard time sitting in your chair.
That's the impact.